Well, hello. It's Larson, and it's good to be here on the podcast. This is a record, I think. Recording one each week here, starting off 2023 on a more productive, or at least a more ambitious pace. Hopefully, I'll be able to keep it up. It's good to have you here. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy what you're hearing, and love to hear your feedback as you listen and digest this stuff. So today I want to dive into the topic, a topic that has come up a lot recently for me, just as I've met with people in my community, and I think it's a pretty big deal. I think it's probably a much bigger deal than we probably appreciate, and that's the topic of work and of being bored at work. It is not good for man to be bored in his job, and I think that's an issue I'm seeing a lot, and I'm seeing it a lot, especially in this town I live in, Huntsville, Alabama, which is our biggest industry is defense contracting, and so it's people who work for for firms, a lot of engineers who are working where the client is the government. It's defense contractors, and so like that's the main industry in Huntsville, and I think this is probably applies equally in a lot of big corporate settings where you work for a really big company, but obviously defense is in defense you're working for the government. And I've probably talked about this before on the podcast, but this may be a helpful, like really quick. I don't know if it's helpful or not, but I'll just mention the Milton Friedman. Has this matrix of your money versus somebody else's money, and then across the two vertical axes, and then on the horizontal you've got spent on yourself versus spent on somebody else. And so in the left, top left quadrant, you have your money spent on yourself. That's where you spend more time and energy trying to select, a good value. When it's your money being spent on someone else, you might spend a little less time worried about the value. You're buying a present for your wife, and you might even spend a little more just to kind of compensate for the fact that you haven't spent as much time thinking about it. And then the right quadrant, top right, you've got somebody else's money spent on you. That's like you've got the company credit card, and you're probably not really looking for the value. You're actually kind of being pretty frivolous. You order the steak and the scotch or whatever with the company card, and then somebody else's money being spent on somebody else is where you're in that quadrant. You typically have people just doing whatever's easiest. They don't really care about cost. They don't really care about price. And I think that's kind of what's going on in these government. These businesses where the government is the client. There's really not a real efficiency and productivity kind of metric, and it's actually what I worry is that it's mostly rent seeking. I'm seeing a lot of it as I talk to people about this. I'm seeing that these firms in Huntsville. There's a lot of rent-seeking behavior. If you're not familiar with that term, it's an economic term. Just for the sake of giving a definition, I looked it up real quick. Investopia says rent-seeking is an economic concept that occurs when an entity seeks to gain added wealth without any reciprocal contribution of productivity. Typically, it revolves around government-funded social services and social service programs. So I think that's like, that's like handouts. That's one way of looking at it. Wikipedia says rent-seeking is the act of growing one's existing wealth by manipulating the social or political environment without creating new wealth. Rent-seeking activities have negative effects on the rest of society. So I don't think it's so bad as that. But what I'm seeing is if you are looking at the numbers, let's say you're you're in the government contracting defense business, and you've got a contract, and you're doing the economic, the business kind of math of how do we generate the maximum amount of revenue for our business. Well, in that scenario, if the government's willing to keep paying you, even if you're over budget and you're over time and you haven't delivered on what you were supposed to, then actually the best way to make the most amount of money is to not deliver the service that they've hired you to deliver, but to stretch it out longer and longer. And again, because the government is spending someone else's money on someone else, they're just looking for the easiest option. So it's like, okay, we got to renew, we got to extend. Okay, fair enough, go for it. Whatever. You guys are, like whatever. There's not this like concern, right? This logical, rational, economic concern for value, and industry and profit. It's someone else's money, just whatever. Yeah, you guys just keep working on it. We'll send you more money. And actually, in government, if you don't spend your budget, then you get it taken away from you and next year. And so everyone wants to spend their budget and they want to ask for more money every year. And so I think it's a bad situation. I was talking to two of these two good friends in Huntsville yesterday, and I'm asking how are things at work, and both are basically saying, I don't really have to do anything. Like, I don't really do anything. Like, I could not show up and nobody would really probably notice. I could do my job with my eyes closed or half asleep. And I'm like, really? And they're like, oh yeah. And I said, so I just asked this hypothetical and said, okay, just humor me here. If you were to go look for another job and you were to go interview with a bunch of other engineering firms in this town, and you were to show up at that interview and say, look, I want to get stuff done. I want to accomplish things. I want to hit deadlines. I want to deliver product and deliver services and blow it out of the park. I want to crush it and make our customers really happy. Wouldn't somebody be just thrilled? Like, I mean, I can tell you as an employer, that's the kind of person I would love to hire. If somebody comes to me and says, I want to solve problems, I want to get things done, I don't want to mess around, I'm like, hired, let's go. I need people like that on my team. So I said, wouldn't somebody hire you and be delighted? And they, both of these guys, looked at each other and looked back at me and said, no, you wouldn't even. They'd say, yeah, it sounds like you're a little too intense for us, or a little too ambitious for us. Like, good luck, That's not viewed as a virtue or as a good thing in a business that is rent seeking, that is not looking to deliver value and efficiency to their client, but is looking to extend the budget. And I think for a conservative Christian man who knows that their employer is doing this and knows that that's what's going on, it's not good for you. It's not good for your soul to be in that kind of environment. It's just not. And I think that leads to like, well, what is a good job, and what is a job, and is a job, does it matter, right? And I think that there's like this. Luther talked about the, kind of the sanctity of all callings and the priesthood of all believers, and this idea that like, it doesn't matter what you do, anything, you're a priest, as a believer, and you don't have to be a priest or do something religious for your work to be meaningful on a spiritual level. That's totally true. But there's this weird, we are so individualistic in our modern age and the way we think about ourselves, and it's gotten to where the only thing about yourself that is meaningful is whatever it is that comes from deep within you, that you feel about who you are. And so everything else, the family you were born into, the work you do, your gender, your religion, all of that stuff is just, that's all external stuff that you can take on and put off, and none of that really matters. It doesn't affect who you are. Who you are is who you are, and none of that other stuff matters. Well, I think that's all backwards. And I think really at the end of the day, whatever it is you think about yourself really matters pretty little, It is who is it that God created you to be, and what are the roles that you're playing in the world that you haven't necessarily chosen for yourself, or don't really have didn't really pick, whether that's a father or an engineer or whatever. Obviously you can choose to be an engineer, but I think people don't look at that as part of their identity. And I've seen that David Bahnsen is coming out with a book on this topic, and basically saying, from what I can see so far, he's just released like a little blurb about it yesterday, but he's going to push back on this whole idea that work is sort of just about being happy, or it's about, it's sort of just what you do to make a living, to make money, and it doesn't matter. He's basically saying your work is who you are, and it matters, and you should work really, really hard, and care about your work. And I'm interested to read the book. I'm sure I'm going to disagree with parts of it, but I'm sure I think he's onto something important that needs to be talked about. And I think, just this, and I think this is not just true in kind of government industries, but I think it's also true in large corporations. But you just end up with a lot of people who are apathetic, who are just apathetic about the work that they're doing. And it kind of leads me to this question of like, what is a good job? And I think as I've talked to men in this town and asked, well, what do you have a good job? Oh, I've got a great job. Why? I hardly have to do anything, and I get paid really well. It's really easy, and they don't really make me do much. I don't really have any significant responsibilities, and I get paid a lot of money. That's not a good job. That's not a good job at all. And so what is a good job? To me, a good job is I'm providing value to other people. I'm doing something meaningful, for other people. I'm accomplishing things. I'm creating things. I'm taking dominion. I am subduing the earth. I am solving problems. That is a good job. And you can do that in any in any millions of different ways. But if that's not happening in your work, in your day-to-day work that is you're getting paid for, then it is rent seeking. I'm sorry, but it's rent seeking. You have found a way to get somebody to pay you, and you're not reciprocating value. You're not solving problems and accomplishing things. And that's just not good. And I think about, this is true in healthcare. So I see like healthcare, physicians are burning out in massive, it seems like it's getting worse and worse. I read articles every day about this. That's the industry that I'm in is physician staffing. And they're burned out. And I posted this on my LinkedIn page the other day. They're not burning out because the work's too hard. They're not burning out because the hours are too long, or because the patients they see are ungrateful, or any of that stuff. When asked why are you burned out, like what's caused your burnout, the number one cause is bureaucracy. The number one cause is I don't feel like I'm solving real problems anymore. I'm in my own words. I'm framing this in my own way. I'm not solving problems anymore. I'm just getting money for my company, and when you drill down into it, it's rent seeking, because in healthcare the largest payer is the government, and the insurance companies, who are basically part of the government. It's there's a lot of collusion, a lot of crony capitalism, and it's just working the system to get more money out of it. And it's not about taking care of patients and solving their problems and helping people get well. It's about working the system to get the money out of it. And sometimes that's hard work. Usually it's just mindless work. But it doesn't, you don't feel like you're actually delivering value or solving any problems for anybody. That's a bad thing. And people ought to be dissatisfied with that. So I don't think it's good for men to be apathetic and bored and um, and checked out. When you're checked out of your job, you're coasting, you're floating, right? And dead bodies float. Um, you don't want to be floating. You want to be swimming. You want to be heading in a direction with intentionality, with purpose. Your days are numbered. Your days are numbered, and you have a very brief little moment, and so you should spend it. You should spend it well. Be a steward of the time and the talent that God's given you. And here's why I think this is so important. This is something my wife has taught me over the years, and I'm so thankful for her wisdom on this topic. My wife and I talk about work pretty frequently, and I'm just telling her about a conversation I had, a contract that I'm negotiating, an employee that I'm struggling with, and I'm just sharing with her the stuff that I'm wrestling with every day. And she's giving me feedback, and she's my number one counselor when it comes to all things career and work related. I go to her. She knows me. She knows what I'm like and what I'm good at and what I struggle with. And she has learned about my business and about the stuff that I do. And so more often than not, when I bring a thing I'm thinking about or wrestling with, my wife has good advice, good suggestions. So there, I've quit a few jobs. I've tried to start a few businesses. I've changed careers, changed job titles. Moved from one thing to another several times in my short. I'm 40, so it's not like I've been in the marketplace for decades, or I guess a couple decades, but not super long. But in that short period of time, I've made a lot of job changes. Every single one of those was a change that I made with my wife's input and advice. And something my wife will say to me is, I think it's time for you to do something different. I can tell you're bored. I can tell you're not being challenged. I can tell you're not being stretched, and you need to do something else. And when I've pressed her on this, when we had this conversation in the early days, why does that matter? I'm getting a paycheck. I'm making money. I've got to, I'll probably keep getting raises if I keep doing what I'm doing. Why does that matter? And her feedback has been, well, look, physical provision is one part of your role in this family. But spiritual provision is the much more significant and important part. And when you are bored, when you are apathetic about what you're spending your whole day doing, that is uninspiring to me as your wife. Submission, right? A wife submitting to her husband means that she's coming under my mission, submission, right? Under mission. She is signing up to be my helper and my number two in whatever it is that I'm doing. And so when she sees me going, yeah, just go and sit there and veg out and don't really think and not really do anything that matters. That's her job too. Like, she's your helper. So you're saying our job's pointless and stupid, and all we're doing is making money. So let's think about something else. Let's think about what vacations we're going to go on, or what retirement's going to look like, or whatever. And that's just depressing and sad and not inspiring to her. It's not a vision. We're not going anywhere. We're just collecting a paycheck. And I think on top of that, the fact that you're preaching to your children, and she said this, you're teaching our kids what work is and what work means. And the message is, yeah, you just find that the job that'll pay you the best money, that requires the least effort and responsibility, and you just kind of ride that out for 40 years. And yeah, that's what work is. How uninspiring and how disappointing. And that apathy, it's not like you can take that like you're practicing apathy, you're practicing laziness, you're practicing you're developing this habit of not exerting creativity and energy and effort and ambition. and you think that that's going to just stay in that one part of your life, and you're going to step out of that, and in the rest of your life you're not going to be that way. No, that's a habit you're developing. So, I know that all of this is a first world problem, so I'm very aware of the fact that, like, I'm sitting here preaching to Americans who have all kinds of opportunities to make all kinds of money, and get to actually be picky about what they do. And I recognize that it's definitely a first world problem. Survival, for a lot of the world, it's just about survival. And obviously that's a different situation. But that's who I am. That's where I am. And so that's the people I'm talking to. Those are my people. And and this is not a minor thing. I think this is eroding the character of our men, especially eroding their willingness to do hard things, their ability to do hard things. It's eroding their ability to be creative, to solve problems, and it's turning us into mindless, I think, slaves in a lot of ways. And so, I think this is something that we should be thinking about. I think we should be thinking about when to quit and when to go find a job where you can be challenged and stretched. And I really do think it's really not about the money. I mean, I know that's easy to say. That may sound easy to say, but it's like it really matters. I know that you got to provide, but you can provide on a lot less than you probably think you need to make. And I think if you're making a high salary, but you're not providing inspiration and leadership and a vision to your wife and your kids, then you're failing. You're failing at the main task that is set before you. And beside that, the task God gave Adam was to take dominion, to subdue the earth, right? And not to sit there and just eat the food that he's given you and just be lazy. He's like, it's tend, keep, work, fill, subdue, and so God wants us out there doing things, making this world, transforming the rest of this world into a garden. And there's a ton of people out there who desperately want people on their team, in their company, who have that kind of mentality. And also in the long run, I promise you, the much more lucrative opportunities are going to be those. I'll just mention this in passing, even though this isn't really the point of the video, but I think it's probably needs to be a point of a future video, perhaps, or podcast. But we don't talk about money enough, I think, in the church. We don't teach about money enough. The Old Testament has tons of stuff about economics, about money, about trade, a lot of Proverbs. And New Testament Christians are like, well, it's just about getting saved from your sins and going to heaven. Like, so yeah, it doesn't really matter. Like, you need to teach about money. Well, there's a reason why we are so bad with money, and we are such bad stewards of our material possessions. And the stereotype that Jewish people are wealthy and care a lot about money is true. And it's because they read the Old Testament and believe it. They believe it's God's word and it's true, and it's culturally part of their DNA, right? And so being a steward of your money and actually, and so anyway, I would just make the comment in passing. And maybe this is a teaser for a future episode, but I think we need to be thinking a lot more about money, and not about, like, I actually think currency, dollars, your bank account, that's not it. Having a big 401k, that's not really it. It's about property and assets, obtaining property and assets, which come with a lot of responsibility generally. and being wealthy in your property, the property that you own, the equity that you have in productive property, whether those are businesses or real estate or other kinds of assets. But Christians just don't even like we don't get past Dave Ramsey. It's like Dave Ramsey is focusing on one Bible verse, get out of debt because the borrower is the slave to a lender, or I guess two Bible verses. And that's where he stops. Like, it's just get out of debt and save a bunch of money. But it has nothing to do at all with the idea of being a steward. And I think about Jesus' teaching, in the parable of the talents. He doesn't just call the guy who just saved the money. He doesn't just call him bad. He calls him wicked. It's not just like a neutral thing. Well, at least you didn't lose it, fair enough. Try again. It's you're wicked. You're being lazy. Go take risk and invest in invest your time and energy and talent in things that are going to be valuable, that are going to create value. Don't just sit there and collect a paycheck and then just stuff it in a mattress. That's not taking dominion. So I'll stop there. I think there's a lot of stuff to talk about here, but I think it's a dangerous thing for men to be apathetic about their jobs, and to be in jobs where they're not being challenged and stretched. And I think it's something you should talk to your wife about. And you should think about, how is this affecting me? How is this affecting my soul? How is this affecting my approach to my family and to the world around me? And what would it look like for me to care? Like, what would it look like for me to try to get things done quickly and deliver value? And I think that there's a deep-seated desire in all of us, because God built us this way, to be productive and to generate, to do meaningful work that generates value. And I think you ignore that to your peril. I think it's bad for your soul. So I'll stop there. It's good to get back on here. I hope that this was helpful in some way to you. And if you've got thoughts, comments, feel free to shoot it over to me in the comments. And we'll talk to you next time. See ya.